people may not appreciate that the federal government is on order of 2.2 million workers, right? So the political appointee strand of that is 4,000 typically. And so you imagine 4,000 people trying to lead 2.2 million. That's 1 in 500. That's impossibility. And, you know, the people who've been working there are doing the same drill year after year after year. It's kind of Groundhog Day, and you're kind of dropping in mid-movie, trying to make sense of the thing and start directing the ship in another direction. So you have to learn very quickly how things are getting done, what the actual order of the day is, and then meet the personalities and have enough technical knowledge to make the right change, be it in the drafting of a grant agreement, not a grant agreement, but like a notice of funding availability, or however they're giving the money out, the regulations, the guidance, but then have the kind of political backbone and the ability to hold fast and stay true when you're going to get a lot of pressure to kind of keel over.
What are some of the ways that these career staff obstruct the things? I mean, you're saying 2.2 million of them versus 4,000 political appointees of particular political persuasion. How do they get in the way of the things that a president wants to do?
Well, I don't think it's so much they obstruct, but it's more lazy politicals and clueless politicals, so they do all the work for them. And it's that's what you really have to watch out for. When you're coming in to do this job, you better take it seriously as work. This is duty along the same ways that someone's going to serve in the military. And you're going to have to work long hours, and you're going to maybe have to go without, some of the funner things in life. Family's going to take a little bit of a hit. What happens is, like I say, you come in, and a lot of people are from various successful walks of life. They're used to managing and delegating responsibility. They want to believe that these folks beneath them can be given a lot of leeway, but they forget that they didn't hire these people, and these folks were there before, and they'll be there after. And the majority of the federal workforce, and this is documented, leans left. Some of the voting patterns are up to 90%. So in today's really divisive culture, it's hard for someone to, even the most noble civil servant, to kind of put that to the side and kind of take political direction. So I think in the main, there is obstruction, to be sure. But I think it's more that the politicals kind of let themselves get led around by the nose. And that starts by not wanting to do the hard work. So an example might be, well, there's a drafting of a notice that comes up every year. Well, what do they start with the draft? They take the draft from last year, or in this case, they take the draft from the Obama administration. And you have to start marking it up early. If you're not going to those initial committee meetings and sitting down with the folks, decisions are going to be quote unquote made that should never be going in that direction.
Yeah.
So, and that's the fault of what? Somebody not attending a meeting that they might think is, not helpful. The bottom line is we need many more eyes and ears, many more technicians on the ground to handle this sort of stuff. But
so the idea of not filling all the roles because of small government is stupid. Because the only way you shrink the government is by having the manpower to.
And every dollar spent on a healthy political appointee could be 10-fold, 100-fold return.
Yeah.
What will happen is this thing can operate on autopilot. They'd be just as soon happy that you came and you went to your cocktail parties and you had your birthday cakes around the office and, maybe a couple ribbon cuttings, and you got to go on a little international junket. And meanwhile, everything else is kind of going at the same level it's gone with the prior administration. So, there's more malign stuff, to be sure, that's happening. I think in the U.S. government, so much of our work is now farmed out to, and this goes for both sides of the aisle, it's farmed out to Beltway bandit contracting. And that's, the federal contractors are on the order of 16 million people. So now you see woke corporations, contracting corporations doing the work on padded up government contracts and feeding that in to politicals to get rubber stamped as the U.S. government's position, say, on homelessness. So that to deconstruct this whole thing is going to take a lot of work, but it's going to, number one, take very talented people ready to come in and serve.
You were part of helping make that happen in the next job that you had in the administration. Tell us what you did at the Office of Personnel Management.
So I had done about 6 months there at HUD, and I was working on California homelessness. That's a story we can tell a little bit later, but basically running into a lot of brick walls, and most of the brick walls were, believe it or not, against our own appointees. So a lot of well-meaning based folks were basically being clipped at the knees by folks who had gotten into the admin much earlier than we had. I was getting pretty dispirited about this. I was pretty close to leaving, and I'd kind of been told, hey, you can go work on faith-based initiatives. And faith-based initiatives, not any means to knock it, but in certain, that's like putting someone out to pasture. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of like,
hey, you believe something? Why don't you go do the faith-based initiatives?
And the awful thing is that they should be front and center. But, in this kind of world of the government, even in the administration, they give you a nebulous title and a job that doesn't have any real reporting requirement, and then your great ideas never get greenlit. Mm-hmm. So that's what that's a recipe for. So anyways, the big news came with President Trump and the second phony, or I get the impeachments mixed up. There were so many phony ones, but basically, when an impeachment stuff went down in February 2020, January 20th, the boss kind of got new air under his wings, and he brought John McEntee in to lead PPO. And soon thereafter, James Bacon, my friend from HUD, was brought into PPO. So they had asked me, hey, would you consider leaving and going to a different agency? And I actually felt like, hey, no, I really want to dig into HUD. This is what I do. But I let go of that. I said, yeah, tell me where you need me. And they said, well, there's a job, White House liaison at the Office of Personnel Management. And I was like, Office of Personnel Management. Okay, sure. Then I hung up the phone and I Googled Office of Personnel Management. And I go, whew, yeah, good. It's not the boring one. That's OMB. I'm getting mixed up. No, and that's for all my OMB friends there. But yeah, I'm kind of being jocular about it. But, Office of Personnel Management is the HR essentially agency for the federal government, and that superintends the 2.2 million federal workforce, as well as kind of being the first among equals for the White House liaisons for political hiring. So pretty much, anybody who got a job from that point on in the Trump administration, I signed their paperwork. Wow. So that is actually through the director of the Office of Personnel Management, and that's descending upon the White House liaison the power to essentially have the president exercise his appointment powers under Article 2 of the Constitution and Title 5 of the United States Code. So it's a big job, and if it's not run properly, it can really gum up the works. And like I said, I had very limited experience in HR. Usually when they're ushering me out of a law firm, I meet the HR folks. And when they're so I didn't have a great HR background, but I had kind of a common sense approach to it. Like, we won this election. Elections have consequences. We want to start putting people in positions who can make decisions that are aligned with what the president told the voters. I didn't think that was too radical a notion. So kind of got under the hood there and started looking at how we can, number one, take charge of this important agency where, the political hiring had been completely gummed up. One thing, like Nick, you were asking, how can they interfere with the agenda, and it's by slow walking. I'd like to write a book one day, like 101 tricks that the silly careers play, but chief among them is slow walking things. There's a lot of bureaucrat tricks, and putting something on a really a long path will make the applicant give up, right? So a number of us are out there in the real world going, hey, I send in my paperwork. What's going on? I can't keep waiting. I got to take this other job offer. We got to move. I got to re-up my rent. It's just, these things have to happen quickly. So part of that was all the White House liaisons who were initially in the buildings had been kind of clueless, and you turn to the career and you say, okay, how does this work? And if you don't ask a really direct set of questions, you're never going to get the full answer out of people. Ultimately, we learned that the Obama administration had essentially taken over political hiring and run it themselves, independent of the careers. That's actually proper. That's exactly what they should have done. But our folks came in and they were clueless and lazy in a lot of cases, and were essentially saying, okay, tell me what next to do. And they're like, okay, well, you have to do this form, and then give it back to me, and I'll enter it onto the system, and we'll see. And I'm looking at their resume, and they don't quite have 4 years experience working in coalitions. So I think that price that you want to pay them is going to be excessive. And so you had careers essentially judging what the hiring for the political was. The politicals were trying to make a case out to a career to bring on a political, and it was absurd. So I said, first of all, we're going to learn to do the computer coding. We're going to get the permission to work on this. And we did that. And we said, now we can process our own paperwork. We don't need to go to a career HR officer and be at, this was agency wide across the whole USG. Some agencies worked better with their White House liaison, some not. But we essentially said, no. We're in charge here. We won the election. Our secretary sits on top of this agency, and our hiring is going to be done toot sweet. And so part of that was kind of just getting this other bureaucrat system out of the way, and then kind of looking at positions and saying, no, these should be occupied by careers. A lot of the positions, and you'll look at something, folks might look at, this is called the Plum Book, right? It's published quadrennially, and it lists all the senior jobs in the administration, including those that are politically appointed, as well as those which are termed career reserved under the law. In most cases, a position can be either. It can be staffed by a career or a political appointee. And, in practice, a lot of places are kind of kept as careers for one reason or another. I mean, probably can't get into everything today, but really important policy-making decisions are made in a number of these positions, and they absolutely should be staffed by someone with the political antenna of the agenda in mind. So kind of going through these org charts and top line and saying, no, we're going to put politicals in these very important positions. And that's what we did. And that, just by opening that up at OPM, it had massive ripple effects across the U.S. government. So in that period, that year of the McEntee reign, if you will, was we finally got, I think, all the cylinders going, and James and his team brought in 1,000 new political appointees and really began to get traction on the agenda. So, I think there were a lot of people, good folks, who had gotten in those first 3 years, but I would say in the main, there were a lot of people like Anonymous and the rest who should never have been within a country mile of a job like that. And you wonder why a lot of the things happen like they did, and that's the reason for it.
It's so incredibly interesting. And, the thing that keeps me up at night so frequently is like, what if you guys had another term? I mean, you guys could have changed everything. And
well, there is another election coming up.
well, that's what I hear.
There's still time.
It also shows, that repository of knowledge that was built up in that team in the last year at PPO and OPM needs to continue doing what they were doing even when we're out of power, and thankfully that's happening. And there's people like Troop Hemingway's got his operation. James is around helping with stuff. Everyone is still very engaged in this, and you in many cases chief amongst them. What are you doing now at the Heritage Foundation? What crazy operation do they have you running there, and what's the hope for it?
Well, big hope, and American Moment's part of it. After the admin, I went home kind of in this Cincinnatus sort of spirit, returned to the farm.
Yeah.
Our farm being in Fort Mill, South Carolina, in a subdivision. But it was really focused on the family, if you will. And we were expecting number 4 at the time, but like I said to my appointees when we were leaving, it's like, we're God, country, and family. And now's the time to go put a little more emphasis on the God and family part of that. But we'll be back for the country thing. So, we have to always remember as conservatives why we're even doing this in the first place.